Alright, hello, my name is Professor Matthew Rotella, and I'm going to be making two different hinges for the purpose of showing you, for the purpose of demonstrating aligning objects and vertices within Maya. So we're just going to jump right into it. And if you're wondering why your background doesn't look different, it looks different than mine, you can cycle through your preferred background by just pressing Alt and B, and usually when I'm modeling I like to just use this one. Anyway, let's get into it. I'm going to make two different kinds of hinges, and I'm going to be aligning things using just my basic manipulators as well as some like grid and view plane snapping, and we're going to be using our grid and our orthographic views to help us out, which you can switch between orthographic views either up here, or you can use these on the side, or you can just press the spacebar while hovering over the proper view in your basic viewport. Anyway, we're going to be making a hinge. So what I'm going to start with is start with a Polygon primitive here, and I'm going to use one, so I'm going to go up to my Create menu, Polygon Primitives. I'm going to be starting with a pipe. I'm going to click the little box so I get the options, and what I'm going to do, well, I'll reset my settings so it looks like the default right there, and I'm going to stick with the basic radius and height that it starts me with, but I'm going to put my thickness to 3 or 0.3, and I'm going to show you where we can edit this all later if we want to. But and then my axis divisions I'm going to set to 12, because we don't quite need 20, and I like 12 because it's a number that's divisible by a lot of things. If I want to divide what parts of my object I'm using into like thirds or halves, quarters, it's 12 is a very agile number for that, and I'm going to create it on the x-axis so that it's standing straight up. So I'll hit create, and voila, I have a pipe. And if you wanted to edit any of its attributes after the fact, you can go in here, and in the Polypipe 1 tab in your attribute editor, which you can find just up here at the top, as well as in your windows, and it's under your general editor, and that's also where you can find your channel box and your tool settings, which we'll be going into, which all of these should also be just shortcuts right up here. But anyway, if you did want to edit this after the fact, you can use these sliders to edit it in any number of ways, but I'm going to stick with what I got here. Anyway, I'm going to create a duplicate of this pipe. So Control D, and Control D to duplicate, and then I'm going to get a second one. You can also just create a second primitive if you want, just from the menu. Alright, and now I'm going to combine these into one object and start making my hinge from that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select both at once. I'm going to go to Mesh, Combine, and that's going to combine them into the same polygon mesh. And the way that this is going to help us is that it'll allow us to bridge between them. And you could also have done what I'm about to do by mirroring the object, and I'll use the mirror tool later on in the demonstration, but for now I'm just going to try and take things one tool at a time generally. I'm going to delete these 6 faces on each side for this particular hinge that I'm going to go for. This is a little bit more of a metaphorical hinge, but I've used it in some rigs in the past for like robots and such. And to select multiple things in a row, you can just hit, you select it with the left click button with your selection tool and just shift select down the line. And now I'm going to double click to highlight the entire selection of edges that outline my hole. Shift, double click to outline the other hole. And alright, now I'm going to go into my edit mesh and bridge. I'll bring up my bridge options just to make sure that I don't have any divisions in the middle, which again we can change this after the fact in our attribute editor if we want, but I don't want. So anyway, bridge, and now I have this connecting the two, and this gives us a little area where something can spin on the inside. And now from this geometry, I'm going to create what will become like the foundation of my hinge, like where it would attach to another object, like in or on another object. So I'll select, and then I'll go down to where I want my selection to end, shift, double click, and it should fill in everything in between. I'm just going to hold down the shift key the whole time, shift, double click, select it, and then double click. Okay. And now I have this selection, and now we're going to make this extrusion outwards. So if I go up to mesh, edit mesh, and then extrude, or you can use the shortcut from your shelf, of course. And then if I try to extrude using just the extrusion tool, you'll see that it'll come out like this. And even though I can now use my scale tool and like scale things in to be level how I may want them, like so, just to eliminate having to scale in Y, when I drag it outwards, instead of using the extrusion tool, I'm just going to use my basic translation manipulator and just drag it backwards. And now to align everything vertically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my scale manipulator and then just scale it. And now everything is perfectly straight coming off of that. And now I'm going to insert one edge loop using my mesh tools, insert edge loop. And I also have it here. Just want to have it set to its default setting, which is relative distance from edge. And create an edge loop like so. And now, press Q, switch back to my selection mode, and I'm going to go into my orthographic view here, and I go into my side view, vertex selection mode, select these vertices here, just using my marquee, which is clicking and dragging, and that way it selects the same vertices on the other side of the pipe, and I'm holding down shift the entire time so that I keep adding to my selection. And again, we're going to use our scale tool to scale in Y, and I'm going to line this up so that I get something like that. Now I'm going to switch to face selection mode, hold down right click, go to face, and I'm going to select this whole loop, which to do so I just click once and then double click on the adjacent polygon, and we're going to extrude outwards from here. So I'll hit extrude, and we'll just have it come out like so. And now what we can do if we want this to become more square, let's say, and line things up, we can do it the same way that we've been doing so far. So go into vertex selection mode, select these, and since it should be symmetrical, even though I'm doing this separately, it should scale symmetrically, or should end up being entirely symmetrical. And if you were to want to make these rounder, you could use the circularize tool, or any number of alignment methods. But there you have it. Now we have a hinge with a square foundation to attach this onto something, and in this case it would be more useful if let's say I create a cylinder and I have some different settings in here from the default, but I'll just keep it how they are because that's how I'm going to want to have it aligned to just fit in here. And I can go ahead and just basically use this as a pipe inserted in between here. And we'll do some more precise aligning in the second hinge that I'm going to show you, which is a door hinge. And let's see, I want to increase the thickness of this. So do radius 7, we'll match it exactly, which we can see if I go into my wireframe view. You can see things lining up perfectly with a radius of 7. Anyway, I'll go back to my shaded view. And then what I've ended up using this for in the past is if I wanted to do some sort of hinge with like a clunky robot arm or some sort like that. Let's see, I'll just insert a couple. I'm not going to worry about being too precise with this, but I'm going to insert a couple edge loops. So I'm going to go into my insert edge loop tool, insert one there, insert one there, go back to my selection tool, and then I'll just get these two long faces here, extrude them outwards, but again, I'm going to just use my movement tool so I pull it straight out. And again, I'm going to align my vertices using my scale tool. And now, since this still has, go into object selection, now since this still has the pivot of the original cylinder I made, it'll pivot from the center here, and I have like this range of motion without clipping. And of course I didn't have to extrude as many faces out for my pipes at the beginning if I wanted a larger range of motion. And just as a quick demonstration of how this could function as a sort of well, as a hinge, with some sort of like shoulder socket, let's say, like if this was the bicep region of like a robot arm or something like that that would need to spin, I can just parent this cylinder by middle mouse dragging the cylinder onto the pipe in my outliner, and now if I spin the pipe, it spins together. And then if I wanted to, and that's the basic idea there. And you can see I have these transforms on my pipe, which came from when I combined the two separate pipes into one mesh. If I want to get rid of them, I'm going to just unparent this for now. I can just select my pipe object here, and I'm going to go into Edit, Delete by Type, and I'll hit History. And that'll clean those right out of there. And now deleting your history is more of a finishing step. You want to do that once you've completely finished making your model, or at least like finished making the piece that you were making, and you want to move on to the next step from there. But in any case, let's continue on. I'm just going to hide these, select them, press the H key, and I'm going to make like an interlocking door hinge. So, again, I'm going to start with the pipe. I'm going to start with the same pipe, so all my settings should be the same from before. So, pipe, got it. And now with a door hinge, basically the way it functions is it's going to be coming off like so from just the bottom, and then it's not going to bridge from here because we need a wider range of motion. It needs to stick out from the door a little bit, and you'll see soon enough. But I'll extrude this outwards from the bottom. I'll align these using the same method I've been doing, all these vertices here, and just scale them together so they're all perfectly flat and aligned. And then I'm going to insert one edge loop into there, and I have my insert edge loop just put here on my modeling shelf, which you can do by just middle mouse dragging anything from a menu onto any shelf. There we go. And scale these edges inwards like so. And I'll line it up like that. And now this piece here is going to be the foundation for creating the rest of the hinge. So for creating the hinges that are going to come to mirror this object, I will in fact mirror this object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Mesh, Mirror. I'm going to look at click on the box to set up my mirror settings. And here I'll reset my settings so that so you can see how to set this up step by step. Which there isn't too much to it. It's like we don't want it to combine with the original, so I'll just uncheck that. And now we want to figure out which direction we want to mirror it in. So if I look at the bottom, I can see my world axes, and I can see where my absolute world edges are that divide my different axes. So with this bold line on my grid right here in the center, and so I'm going to base it off of the world axes, and I can see that I want to mirror it into positive Z because it is existing in negative Z, because I can see Z is pointing out to the left there, down at the bottom. So Z, direction, positive, and I'll hit mirror, and we get a copy of it. Very good. And let's see. And alright, and now I'm gonna work from there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna separate these into two separate meshes. So I'm gonna have separate up here, and then you can see I get the two different poly meshes with the transform. I can go up here and just do modify, or select the two poly meshes here, edit, delete all by type, or delete by type history, and then now get rid of those transforms that I had before. And now I'm going to shape out the rest of my hinge. So, let's see. And I'm going to use snapping to help me do it. So here we go. I'm going to create a duplicate of this mesh here. I'm going to turn on my types of grid snapping here. I'm going to space these 3 apart from each other. Like so. I suppose more like 4 apart from each other. And you know what? I'm going to make these 2 squares wide each, which I could have done this before making the duplicate, but I can do it afterwards. So now, thanks to my snapping, and if I just select all of these vertices, I can move them directly onto the grid space that I want them to be put onto. And just using my marquee to select all these vertices that I want, making sure that they're each 2 wide. Go back to my vertex selection, like I said, 3 squares in between. And now I'm going to bridge, and this will become one part of my door hinge. So all I need to do is delete these faces here on either side, which I could have made mirror copies of these using the mirror tool, but just for the sake of everything. Alright, now it's time to combine these. So I'm going to select both in object selection mode, mesh, combine, and then I'm going to go to edge selection mode, double click to select the entire hole, shift, double click to select the entire other hole, and then bridge. Now I have all of this geometry here, and I can make my selection here, and I can even just drag this outwards to be whatever length I want it to be, and then here I can select both of these and hit extrude, and let's see, maybe we'll extrude in opposite directions of each other, and I can call that, and then this would be the part of the hinge where the screws would attach to. And if I want this to be thicker, again, I can just select my vertices and just move them. And alright, now it's time to make the interlocking hinge, which I would do in a very similar way, but using my vert snapping, I can have it line up to be but using my vert snapping, I can have it line up to be exactly the width, like if we were using some like perfect machinery to create our interlocking pipes here. And it seems my pivot is a little bit off, but I can move my pivot back here. It seems I'm just a touch off one way or another. So, but I'm not going to get too frazzled about it. I can get pretty darn close there. And just have that line up with the grid. Anywho, I'll make duplicates of this. Control D. And Control D. And now I'm going to combine these three the same way that I did the others. So mesh, combine, face, alright. And now I'll just do my bridging one at a time. Double click to select that hole, shift double click to select the other hole, bridge. Same thing on this side. Bridge. And now you'll notice that I left that little bit of space here in between the pieces when I was making this, when I was making my base geometry, so that we would have a full range of motion when it gets time to get to this part here. And if you ever wanted to make any part, any individual segment of this wider or smaller, you can do it just by selecting whole segments of vertices and just extending it or contracting it to be as short or as tall as you want it to be. And here, if I want to just have this line up so that they're equally as wide, do it like so. And I'll just turn my snapping off now. I don't need it anymore. I'll go into object selection mode. And my pivot is not perfectly centered any longer, but actually I'll turn my snapping back on because I believe I snapped these perfectly. I'm holding down D to move the pivot. And now I'll go back to my move tool, and now my hinge can move freely all the way around, just like you would need a regular door hinge to do so, depending depending on how it's mounted to your door frame. And now, if you wanted to make that same, like the peg that would go in and connect to your two hinges, it is certainly not hard. I know from before that a radius of 0.7 will match me up exactly. Here. And I'll just turn off my snapping. And if I wanted to put a little end cap on this over yonder, I could just go like so and insert one edge loop, select the outside, and extrude. Like so, and then I have some sort of basic nail, which I could just line up like that. And that would be your complete door hinge. Alright, so I hope you learned about just aligning vertices, getting vertices that would be curved, and then making them straight using just your basic manipulators, as well as using snapping to align things, and just how the different ways that you can get your different objects to line up perfectly using just your basic manipulators and snapping. And whenever you're modeling, just make sure that you try and think ahead a few steps. Modeling is a lot like figuring out a puzzle box as far as how to model anything efficiently. So you have to try and think a few steps ahead and have like the entire and visualize the entire shape so that you can plan and get the model done as efficiently as possible. Which is why when you're modeling, you always start with your simpler shapes and you sort of rough in the whole shape and then go back and refine and get smaller and smaller details accomplished as you go. But, alright. That'll be all. And, hope you have a wonderful whatever amount of time you want to have. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, what have you.